Hello, I'm Casper Leitch, and it's time for Hemp. This is a program that has been designed to put together the information, facts, and figures regarding the hemp, also known as marijuana plant. We're also trying to focus on the historical, past, and maybe even more so, should we say, economical past of this plant. Today, my guest is Chris Conrad. Chris Conrad is a leading spokesperson for America's new hemp/marijuana restoration movement. He is the National Director of both the Business Alliance for Commerce in Hemp, also known as BAC, and the New Republic Agenda. He is on the Executive Board of America's Hemp Council, the Family Council of Drug Awareness, and Southern California's NORML, which also stands for the National Organization of the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Chris is a recognized authority in the environmental, economic, civil liberties, social, medical, and political aspects of hemp/marijuana prohibition. He designed and edited Jack Here's enlightening book on the uses and history of the hemp plant, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
My pleasure, Casper.
Can you tell us a little bit about the BAC organization, please?
Sure. The Business Alliance for Commerce in Hemp was formed a couple of years ago by a group of investors and business people and activists who are concerned, and researchers who are concerned about the current trend of American politics, not only in terms of the suppression of civil liberties involved with the marijuana movement, of course, but with the suppression of the economic alternatives that are available by developing hemp. And we have basically 4 goals that we're working for. The first is the deregulation of commercial non-smoking uses of hemp for things like paper, fiber, fuel, food, things like this. The second is to restore the medicinal use and availability of hemp as a medicine or as an herbal user. And the next is to get back, to restore the civil liberties, the freedom of choice of the individual in terms of what they garden or what they choose to consume in their leisure time. And the final one is to develop a system of outlets and other kinds of ways of handling a domestic hemp industry that would be for consumption through smoking and so forth. Something along the lines of the wine industry, where the individual can grow it, or it could also be used.
Yeah, I don't know, I've always gotten the impression that this movement is primarily an organization trying to get a bunch of old hippies together so they can get out there and legalize marijuana so they can smoke the brains out, you know? Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is a little different than that.
One thing is that if there were a bunch of old hippies who got together and went out in the fields where they're growing commercial industrial hemp, they're not going to get to smoke their brains out because it's going to be, it contains so little THC that it wouldn't be good as a psychoactive substance or as an intoxicant or however you want to refer to it. It's a relaxational.
Why is it that it can, why do you mean by that? Is it a different kind of hemp plant than what you get high with?
No, it's still a cannabis plant. Cannabis is, of course, a scientific name for it. Hemp is the American or English name for the plant. Marijuana is just an expression that William Randolph Hearst picked up from Mexico, and in fact, they don't even use it in Mexico. They call it mota down there, or cañamo. But marijuana was just like this slang word that we use nowadays, but it is the same plant. It's just a matter of how you cultivate it. If you were growing it very densely together, you get a lot of stem, a little bit of leaf, very little THC. If you spread it out more, you'll get more of the branching and flowers, and that's where your THC is.
But isn't re-legalizing sending a wrong message to kids, especially? We're saying, all right, dudes, go out there, get high, party your brains out. We don't care. It sounds like it's sending a wrong message to me.
Well, first off, prohibition isn't really about sending messages, it's about sending people to jail, and there's a big difference between these two things. If we're not saying that, for example, tobacco and alcohol, these are things that we don't condone as a society as such, but we do allow people to have that freedom of choice, especially adults. It's a way of simulating the difference between a child and adult, is that when you reach a certain age where you can consume alcohol and tobacco, that's considered toys of the adult, so to speak. And so marijuana will be placed similarly in a category like that.
Yeah, but won't kids have easier access to it if you legalize it?
Well, I would say actually less so. There are 2 reasons for this. One is because when we see countries like the Netherlands or Spain and countries where they have legalized marijuana for private use, they find that actually the use goes down, it hits a stable level in society, and part of that is because the mystique of doing something illegal is taken away. The other thing is that if it's being vended by someone who is a distributor who has a license on the line and pays fees, and they know if they sell it to children that they're going to lose their license and their distributorship, they're not going to do it. Whereas if it's in the hands of criminals who are attempting to make money by whatever hook or by crook they can do it, They don't care who buys it.
Yeah, but we know that marijuana is a gateway drug, and that it leads to other drugs, and it leads to more damaging effects. It leads to all kinds of problems. If nothing else, it leads to lack of motivation, which then you have people not wanting to work, and therefore you even hurt the economy. I mean, I don't get it.
Well, the National Education Association and the National Academy of Sciences both say that tobacco is the gateway drug. Virtually everyone who smokes marijuana has already experimented with tobacco and with alcohol by the time they get there. If you want to look at it in terms of addictive psychoactive substances, most people start off with sugar and chocolate, then they move on to tobacco, then they go to alcohol, then they start smoking marijuana. By then they're halfway into this pattern. The problem is a pattern of behavior of abusive dependency. That's where the problem is, not whether they smoked marijuana or not.
Yeah, but you know, sugar is not as bad for you as smoking marijuana is.
Well, sugar rots your teeth, and smoking marijuana doesn't. I mean, right off the bat, there's an obvious difference.
But they say that, you know, lung cancer, it makes you sterile. It's a very dangerous thing, they say.
Unfortunately, we have to deal with a lot of false studies right now. There's a lot of bad information that's being pushed around as if it were true. For example, the lung studies. 250,000 or so people a year die from tobacco-related lung problems. Not one person in history has ever died from smoking marijuana, and yet the government tries to tell us that marijuana is 50 times more dangerous, but it just obviously it doesn't make sense. The brain damage thing had to do with killing some monkeys, that they suffocated the monkeys and they found they had brain damage. The fact that they used marijuana smoke to suffocate them, if they had done the same thing with a plastic bag, they would have found the same effect. These studies are not scientifically valid. They don't have control groups. They don't have replicatable evidence to support what they're saying. They're really not true. They're discredited. The only reason that these are even touted around right now is the fact that the DEA and groups like the Partnership for a Drug-Free America, which is, you see their ads on TV a lot saying, you know, that marijuana is this or that. Now, you notice they don't say anything bad about alcohol or tobacco, even though these are the most abused drugs in our society. The reason for that is because something around 60% of their funding appears to be coming from groups like Philip Morris, who have a vested interest in alcohol and tobacco. So they gain by saying that marijuana is bad, because you're talking about the gateway effect. What social behaviorists call the real phenomenon there is called drug switching, which is that people who tend to take one substance or another, that they'll use one, and when they use one, that they don't use the other one as much. And what happened in the 60s and the 70s is that as marijuana became more popular, consumption of alcohol and tobacco went down. And so these companies that are selling these products are now saying all these things, putting out these false reports about health damage from marijuana.
Okay, now you've got all these wonderful facts and statistics, but you cannot ignore the fact that Alaska, after 15 years of having marijuana legalized, right, turned it around and made it a crime again to possess it. California has had 17 attempts to legalize with initiatives, the hemp plant, and they've all failed, you know? I mean, with the political climate as it is, how come you're out here pushing it like this? What makes you think someone's actually going to sit there and go, okay, this is true, let me see the deal?
Well, no one said it was going to be an easy process. These are politically difficult times because there's a tendency towards repression on the part of our government, that they have the hard-line approach to a lot of things. However, the fact that for 17 years people have been trying to get it legalized here by the initiative process in California, well, what is a crime and what is a habit, I guess, is a question there, a personal choice, because you don't see murderers out there organizing to get murder legalized, or thieves out there organizing to get theft legalized. Criminal acts, we don't have political groups working for the legalization. In the case of marijuana, the fact that so many people are working for it shows you that this is a political issue. As far as the immovability of government, there are two things on that. One is that maybe we've been using the wrong approach. Maybe initiatives are not the answer. Maybe they are, but maybe they're not. What is more likely is that we should go through approaching the deregulation process, which will be a step-by-step process of, as we say, first the commercial non-smoking uses, then the medicinal uses, then the private consumption, and finally an industry of. But what happened in Eastern Europe is is a good example of what can happen. The pressure builds and builds. When the change comes, it comes very fast. I think we're talking about a change that could be as soon as 1 year, could be as far away as 5 years. But look how it took 1 month for the Berlin Wall to come down. Now, that society was much more repressive than what we're going through here with prohibition.
That's true.
And so
now we have here some items, right?
That's
made of hemp.
correct.
Is this true?
Right. There's different.
I'd like to get a chance to go over those in the second half of the show, if at all possible. And I'm very impressed with some of the things you've had to say. I mean, you've been very enlightening, and I'm sure that the second half will be just as informative. But what I feel now is an unusual approach to the topic is business as you've taken it. You felt that it's going to be $1 million industry. It's going to be a $1 million job maker, open all kinds of jobs for different people. Is that true?
Well, yeah, it really is true. I think that something that we should consider at this point, though, is that, like, we have here an example of a hemp plant. Now, most people's awareness of it is limited to this area right here, the leaf area, which is frequently called marijuana. Now, actually, the most valuable part of the plant is not this, which of course generates $43.1 billion a year in the United States, which is
that much
earned by Americans cultivating it for marijuana, selling it to other Americans.
Illegally?
Yeah, that's correct, in the illegal state. It's selling, marijuana right now is selling for something in the neighborhood of $200 to $400 an ounce. If it was legalized, it would be talking about this probably being $100 a pound that people would be paying for the bulk areas, and then there would be your connoisseur grades and so forth, so there would be a wide variety. But it's misleading to deal strictly on the economics of this part of the plant, because the real value is going to be in this part right here, the stem, which contains a large percentage of cellulose. It includes fiber, and it can, also the roots of the plant are important because they're a part of conservation programs. They can be used to, like, anchor soil. For example, in California, we used to have a program to prevent mudslides, that they would plant hemp on hillsides that were threatened during rainy seasons. Okay. Now, we still have the same problem with the mudslides on the hill, but we can't grow hemp on the hillside to hold it in place. And the reason for that is because hemp can grow up to 20 to 30 feet within one growing season. It puts out approximately about as much root underground as it puts plant above ground, and so it puts down extremely strong anchoring roots that are, not only do they prevent the erosion, but they actually enrich the soil.
Wow. No, I never would have been aware of that. Oh. Well, okay, so I can see some of your viewpoints, but still, you know, the creating of the jobs. Now, you got to take in consideration there's going to be some jobs lost, too, like the loggers who are cutting down the trees, because you talk about doing it for paper, right?
Right.
What are you going to do about those people?
Well,
you going to put them on welfare?
Well, when the automobile was invented and people stopped using buggies, then the buggy drivers had to go out of business, and the people who made buggies went out of business. And what happened was the society made a transition into what we consider now as the modern era, where people learned how to drive cars, the buggy drivers learned other trades, the companies that had been making the buggies started to make automobiles and so forth. It's simply a matter of transition in society. We can't be anchored onto this basically a suicidal system that we have nowadays, which is based upon petrochemicals and poisonous substances.
Wow. Well, learning here is quite a bit of an experience, I must say. And as I said earlier, we have a public service announcement I'd like to bring to you from the United States Department of Agriculture. We find this to be a very interesting approach from our government for our farmers. And I think this is their way of letting the world know exactly where they stand, at least back in 1942, when they originally released this during World War II to help with the war effort, should we say. So I hope you enjoy it. And when we come back, we'll spend more time with Chris.
Long ago, when these ancient Grecian temples were new, hemp was already old in the service of mankind. For thousands of years, even then, this plant had been grown for cordage and coarse cloth in China and elsewhere in the East. For centuries prior to about 1850, all the ships that sailed the western seas were rigged with hempen rope and sails. For the sailor, no less than the hangman, hemp was indispensable. A 44-gun frigate, like our cherished old Ironsides, took over 60 tons of hemp for rigging. Including an anchor cable 25 inches in circumference. The Conestoga wagons and prairie schooners of pioneer days were covered with hempen canvas. Indeed, the very word canvas comes from the Arabic word for hemp. In those days, hemp was an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. Then came cheaper imported fibers for cordage, like jute, sisal, and manila hemp, and the culture of hemp in America declined. But now, with Philippine and East Indian sources of hemp in the hands of the Japanese, and shipment of jute from India curtailed, American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand percent. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp. In Kentucky, much of the seed hemp acreage is on river bottom land such as this, along the Kentucky River Gorge. Some of these fields are inaccessible except by boat. Thus, plans are afoot for a great expansion of the hemp industry as a part of the war program. This film is designed to tell farmers how to handle this ancient crop, now little known outside Kentucky and Wisconsin. This is hemp seed. Be careful how you use it. For to grow hemp legally, you must have a federal registration and tax stamp. This is provided for in your contract. Ask your AAA committeeman or your county agent about it. Don't forget, hemp demands a rich, well-drained soil such as is found here in the bluegrass region of Kentucky or in central Wisconsin. It must be loose and rich in organic matter. Poor soils won't do. Soil that will grow good corn will usually grow hemp. Hemp is not hard on the soil. In Kentucky, it has been grown for several years on the same ground, though this practice is not recommended. A dense and shady crop, hemp tends to choke out weeds. Here's a Canada thistle that couldn't stand the competition. Dead as a dodo. Thus, hemp leaves the ground in good condition for the following crop. For fiber, hemp should be sown 5 pecks to the acre. With drill, the closer the rows, the better. These rows are spaced about 4 inches. This hemp has been broadcast. Either way, it should be sown.
Very interesting, I should say. I guess that's exactly where Uncle Sam stands on the topic of hemp. And my guest, Chris Conrad, seems to stand very firmly on it being a very interesting and lucrative way of generating prosperous economy in the United States.
Actually, that's not the way the government stands on hemp. This is a realistic answer to where the government should be on hemp. Where the government is on hemp is quite different. What they're doing is interfering with the private sector's ability to develop a very valuable natural resource that could create $1 trillion a year of income for Americans, produce tens of thousands of jobs, 50,000 new products could be brought onto the market, or products that we currently make could be made out of hemp to the equivalent of 50,000 different products. So our current policy is to repress all that.
So you said, now we have some products here ready right in front of us that you say are made of hemp, right?
Right, or
could you,
with hemp.
Would you be gracious enough, please, to share what you brought with us with our audience?
Sure. What we've got here, the first thing I should show you is this shirt. This is made of hemp with a blend with cotton. This is a 55% hemp, 45% cotton. It's
that's made of hemp, 55% hemp?
Correct. It lasts longer. It's 26% more water absorbent. It's more insulative, and it's much stronger than regular cotton would be.
Wow.
In the foreground here, I've got 3 pieces of paper. One of them, this is like a parchment style paper here. This is what your Declaration of Independence and Constitution were originally written on, a paper similar to quality as this. This is a filtration paper here, tea bags, things that you need to have stay strong when it's wet, because hemp fiber is strong. It doesn't lose that when it's in water. This in the middle is a, looks like a newsprint type of a paper. It's a pulp type of a paper. And
it's made of hemp, huh?
Correct.
Did they use this back in the early days? You know, like around Constitution time or something?
Yeah, well, they didn't use this. This is a pulp paper. They use more like this, the fiber paper that's...
And they wrote on it?
Manuscript paper.
Daily?
Correct. Right. Now, over here we have some seed. This is used as bird seed right now.
Yeah, get the birds high, right?
Yeah, it's called Happy Bird. Actually, birds sing better because when they use it, we don't know if it's, there's very little THC in there. It seems to be because it moistens their throat, because it has a lot of oil. In fact, it's 30% oil. And right next to it here, we have some hair gel. This is made from hemp oil, and it's also got some herbs in it, some of the herbal hemp in it. Now, moving forward a little further, we see some other products that are made from the seed. When the seed is crushed, it produces oils and a high protein powder here, which is called seed cake. This is more nutritional than any other thing that we know of, excepting for soya. And in terms of digestibility, it's more digestible than soya. So it actually, when you look at parts of the world like northern Africa and Bangladesh and these areas where there's a lot massive starvation, a lot of that is a result of international laws that are preventing them from growing hemp for use as a food supply, which it has been for thousands of years for these countries.
No, really?
Yes, exactly. The law is the Single Convention Treaty of 1961 by the United Nations, and you notice that the big periods of starvation began in the mid-60s, late 60s, and continue on to today. Within 10 years of banning hemp, starvation became part of the norm for these parts of the world.
Wow.
Now, these two pieces of oil, samples of oil, this is a raw oil. You see it's got a little brownish color similar to the seed itself. This, on the other hand, has been distilled, and so it's cleaner looking. You can make anything from machine oil to cooking oil out of these.
Wow.
These are all fibers from the plant. This is a rather raw fiber. This is called a tow line. Both of these are from Russian hemp.
Russian hemp?
Right. Now, this string here and this rope, they're both from Hungarian hemp. This has been made into a bag here through a macrame process. They've wrapped it up. Here's a pot holder made out of it, your balls of twine, this tea bag back in here, and it swings us right back down to the plant from which all these products can be made.
Wow. Okay, now if you can make all these things, that sounds grand, right? But aren't you going to have a problem with like re-educating and retooling the market for people learning how to work with hemp and construct with it? I mean, we know that to loom with cotton, you use, you know, different type, a little bit different type loom than you do with hemp. If you're going to have your car running around, running on methanol, right? Or is it methane?
Methanol.
Methanol.
Yeah. Methane would replace natural gas.
Okay, methanol. Then it means you got to turn the whole car over, turn the whole industry over, right?
Not really. One of the strong points about it is it's a big incentive because there's billions and trillions of dollars of profit that can be generated, and very little retooling is actually required. For example, if the car needs a conversion unit, and then it can run on the methanol. But you wouldn't have to, for example, if you tried to make a hydrogen-powered car, you're talking about some major retooling. With a methanol-powered car, it's just a matter of one new part that needs to be put in to make it more workable.
Are there any other plants that can make all these things and can do all these things?
There are plants that can be used to do different parts of it, but as far as doing all of them, that's another matter. I wanted to get back to the other question about the retooling, though, because, for example, that's why they have the cotton blended in with the hemp here, because the looms are set up for a short fiber like cotton, and hemp has a long fiber, and so in order to make it work, all they did was blend it with the cotton, and they'll still get a lot of the benefits of the hemp, but without having to do the retooling that would otherwise have been required. You can make the oil, for example, is similar in quality to that made from jojoba plants. However, that's all you can make from jojoba, and it's a desert plant. It takes a long time to grow. Hemp grows copiously throughout the world. That's why we have these massive eradication programs, because it produces so much, and it can grow anywhere in the continental United States. Paper and fiber can be made out of things like kenaf, or sugar cane can be used for making paper, for example, if you live in the tropics.
But what you're saying,
we don't live in the tropics.
What you're saying is there's only one plant that you know of that can do all of these things in all of the climates.
There's a lot of plants that can do one or the other of these things, but there's only one that can do it all and produce the amount of volume. If you want to go for fuel production, for example, that's going to take tons and tons of biomass. There's no plant that can do that on the continental United States excepting for hemp to produce a volume. Corn produces 1/10 as much.
Okay, now when you're doing it for biomass, now you're saying that it does a cleaner thing to the air. I mean, the way you describe it almost like cleans the air while it's up there. And I can't imagine that. I mean, and yet we've got cars throwing our dinosaurs and shells up in the air, right? And when you say that there is a difference.
Well, people have to understand, I don't know if this audience would know about what biomass is. Biomass is energy that's produced from living plant organisms, okay? There's a carbon that's in the living plants that's then converted into, through a process that makes it into anything from gasoline to charcoal instead of coal, to methanol and methane gases. You can make all kinds of energy from it. Now, the difference between these two things, you can make all those same sources of energy basically out of fossil fuels. However, that's from living things that were around millions of years ago, and the difference is that when you go to dig the fossil fuels out of the ground or whatever, you're talking about drilling, you're talking about strip mining, you're talking about pulling the stuff out of the ground, burning it, putting it into the air. Now, when you're going for a biomass, you have the crop. As the crop grows, it takes carbon dioxide out of the air and it puts out oxygen through a process known as photosynthesis. So you're constantly recycling the air, and that's where the cleaning up is concerned, and it also reverses the greenhouse effect.
Okay, but now look, if, you know, this is such a great thing. If hemp can do all these marvelous things, why aren't other countries jumping on the bandwagon and saying, well, we're going to grow hemp and we're going to make paper and fuel and fiber out of it? I mean, obviously America knows something that, you know, the rest of the world doesn't seem to know, right?
Yes and no. First off, a lot of countries are doing things. For example, we mentioned that this stuff is here from Russia. These are from China. This is from Hungary. Czechoslovakia produces it. Yugoslavia produces it. We've got a lot of the world that does it. What the United States does is we control a lot of the technology needed to move into the next era of hemp agriculture and hemp commerce and the hemp trades, which we're suppressing. For example, the machine that breaks down the hemp was patented in 1936. Hemp was outlawed in 1937. Those patents were not released to the rest of the world where hemp was still being grown.
I have just one more question, and make it short, please. What kind of timetable do you think we're on as far as making this legal?
Well, it's inevitable in terms of the environmental and economic pressures against us. If we go into a depression or a heavy recession, it'll probably happen within the next couple of years. I would say anywhere from 1 to 5 years, depending upon the amount of resistance and the ability of the American people to understand not only the importance of this thing, but how the individual gains from it by more freedom, more choice, more products available, more job opportunities.
Okay. Now, if anybody's interested in finding out more about BAC organization or the things that we have here made of hemp, there's a number and an address flashing in front of your screen. You can contact BAC at the number and address that's showing there, or you can contact the hemp organization, and there'll be somebody there to be happy to answer your questions. And I have really enjoyed having you as my guest today, Chris. I really have.
Well, my pleasure, Casper. I hope to hear from some of your viewers. There's a lot more information, as you know, that we can't get out.
Oh, I know. And I really, I mean, before meeting you, I had no idea, you know, of half of what you were telling me. And I hope the viewers find that to be true, too, with themselves. And if there's ever a chance to have you back on, I'd love to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us here for Time for Hemp. And I want to give a very nice thank you to the lady who made my wardrobe, Sherry Rose. And as any nice artist, she always signs her work, I must say. She's helped me to look good today. And I want to thank the people here who have worked very diligently in getting this production put together. And thank you for tuning in. We'll come back again pretty soon. And the next time we have a chance to chat, look for Casper Leitch, Time for Hemp.